Welcome back everyone. Well, it looks like it's going to be a really lovely season for tomatoes this year. It seemed like an eternity waiting for them to ripen, but as you can see, the red Sakura cherry here is starting to turn lime green, and we've got full trusses of tomatoes. And as usual, the Sun Gold are the very first to ripen. Hi everyone, welcome back. Well, I'm down on the proverbial dog shelf taking a look at the tomatoes, and I thought in this update we'd focus purely on the tomatoes and look at the beefsteaks and the cherries that I've got growing here in the long 16x8 greenhouse. As you can see, I'm squinting a little bit. The sun's finally come out. We've had about 2 weeks or so of rain, and this is just what we need to help the tomatoes to ripen up. Well, I grow about 12 varieties of beefsteak each year, but I'm only going to show you maybe 5 or 6 this morning. And these varieties are mainly open pollinated, they're not hybrid varieties, so you can take your own seed. And if you continue to grow them over a period of years, then they do kind of acclimatise to the growing conditions wherever you are growing. So we'll start with this one here, and this has got a lovely deep green collar. Now this variety is Paul Robeson, and you've probably heard several other YouTubers mention this one. Now I've grown this probably for about 7 or 8 years now, and I have kept my seed, and as you can see it's a beautiful green shoulder, and the base is just starting to colour up a little bit. It's kind of a lime green, and it will turn into a beautiful chocolatey brown finished colour, and it's really sweet as well. And I think I've won 1 or 2 prizes at shows with this one based on taste, and it will grow possibly to about 400 grams or so, maybe a pound. Typically if you've got 4 or 5 on a truss, they tend to be this sort of size, put my hand in, or a little bit smaller, so there might be maybe 300 to 400 grams on this one, but they're a beautiful tomato. We've got a second truss forming as well, and the second one is kind of a double truss, forked truss, and there are about 4 on there as well. And I have already gone round and trimmed some of these trusses. As you can see, you'll see that I've just taken off the ends of each truss to leave maybe 4 to 6 tomatoes, because they had about 10 on, 12 on. But that's Paul Robeson. If we just turn to the right, this is a tomato that I've shown you several times before, and this is a pink Brandywine. Now there are several variations of this. The best is probably considered to be the pink Brandywine, known as the Sudduth's strain. I'm not certain that this one is, because I grew it before and it was, but I used up all the seed that I got, and then I didn't grow it for a few years. And I think I bought this one from Nikki's Nursery, an online seed seller. But you can see it's capable of producing absolutely massive tomatoes. And I would say that this one is close to being 1 kilogram already. I don't tend to overwater my tomatoes, so you know, the growth is gradual, and there are a couple of other tomatoes on this truss as well, kind of holding it back. Had they not been there, then you know, this weight could have been added into this tomato, or part of it anyway at least. But this one, as I say, is destined to be 1 kilo or so, and it finishes off being a kind of rosy pink. And as you can see, it's a potato leaved variety, quite a large leaf, like an elongated heart-shaped leaf. In terms of the other characteristics of the plant, it's a long season variety. It'll grow probably about 90 to 100 days before reaching maturity, and that's 90 days from planting, not from sowing. One of the interesting things about this tomato is that later in the season you need to continue to water the plant, and that's true of a few other varieties as well, like the Costa Lutos, which are a crimpled beefsteak tomato. Generally, when I reach the start of September, I ease back on the watering and virtually stop, but you can't do that with this tomato. You need to keep feeding it a little bit of water, and to feed it as well. Not copiously, but just enough to keep it going, because if you don't, the tomatoes that have not yet ripened, they tend to shrink, and you'll see the skins go all wrinkly and crackled, and they basically kind of dehydrate on the plant. So they need to be watered. But that's the nature of beefsteaks. They do have different growing habits, and I've stocked this plant as well, along with most of the other beefsteaks, and we've got 4 trusses for the most part on each plant. The tomato that we're looking at here in the corner is a hillbilly tomato. Again, this is an open pollinated variety, so you can keep your seed from it, just like the previous 2 varieties that we've looked at. And it produces an orange with yellow streaked tomato, and it's not that prolific a plant in my experience. You will only get, you know, like 3 or 4 decent sized tomatoes on each plant, and as you go up the plant during the course of the summer and late summer, you will find that the tomatoes are a little bit smaller. So in terms of weight, this plant is not as high yielding as some others, but it does produce a really beautifully tasting tomato. Again, I've won prizes with this variety as well, but only in good years when it's been really sunny, because then it takes on a kind of peachy taste. And you'll see that I've been popping pictures up just to give you an idea of the finished product, as it were, what they look like. I can't give you any idea of taste really. I can tell you what, you know, what the mixture of flavours are, but you really need to grow this to appreciate it, because it's not like many of the red hybrid beefsteaks that you can buy, the F1s, which can be pretty tasteless sometimes. Some are okay, but for the most part, in my experience anyway, of nearly 15 years of growing them, the open pollinated, the heritage varieties produce a much better taste. That's not guaranteed, it depends upon the season. You need long days and light intensity, so and that means having good quality light, you know, keeping your windows clean, making sure that the plant's not overshadowed. And that's one of the other things that you can see now with all of the tomatoes. If I just pan round, you'll see that the bottom 10-inch or so of the plant has had its leaves removed, just to provide decent airflow and better light. And the leaves that I took off were starting to age a little bit. You can see, like this one here, they were starting to lose the colour in the leaves, and so I removed them. But I don't remove them unless the leaves look aged and ready to be removed. And this tomato here has to be my favourite tomato. It looks great, but more importantly than that, it tastes great. And again, as with any tomato, it depends upon the kind of season that you've had. But in my experience, if you get 2 or 3 weeks of really good weather, really good light in the run-up to this one ripening, and if you ease back on your watering in the last couple of weeks as well, so that your pot, your compost, just about dries out, and this can produce an absolutely fabulous tasting tomato. The very first show that I entered, this one won the best tasting tomato in the tomato class, and they had prizes for first, second, third and fourth for beefsteak, cherry and standard tomatoes, and this one won the best beefsteak and the best overall tomato in the tomato class. So out of about 70 or 80 exhibits, this one was the best at the show, and it tasted absolutely fabulous. And I've said in previous videos that after the judges had done the taste test, the table with the exhibits was opened up to the public and they were able to taste it, and I stood there with a plastic knife, and it was a big tomato. It weighed about 1.5 pounds, the one that I exhibited, and I'd not actually, it was the first one to be harvested from that particular plant, and I'd not even tasted them. And I cut chunks off, and I had a queue of 7 or 8 people just waiting to taste it, and then a few people coming back to have another piece because it tasted so nice. And it really does live up to its name. It has a hint of like a brandy liqueur taste, but then with a mixture of currant flavours, and it had a distinct, in my view, a distinct black currant. I know it sounds hard to believe, but it had a distinct black currant and kind of liqueur taste to it, like a mild version of that. And everyone else thought the same as well, and it really did taste fantastic, and it looked beautiful as well. It had a bluey, purpley look to the interior, to the flesh, and not too wet a tomato either. Really, really beautiful. So this is my favourite brandy boy, but this one, surprisingly, is an F1 hybrid, and that's why I said some hybrids do taste okay. Well, they hit gold with this one, so I would highly recommend it. We'll take a look at the cherries now, and on this side of the greenhouse I've got 3 Zakura, I think I've got 3 Sun Gold, and I might also have a black cherry. Yeah, there's a black cherry up at the end there. And we'll just take a look at the Zakura to start with, and again this is actually where the hybrids come into their own with some of the cherry varieties. There are some great open pollinated and heritage varieties. You know, everyone knows about Gardener's Delight. It's cheap to buy the seed, you get hundreds of seeds as well, and you can continue to take your own seed, and it's a nice, you know, traditional tomato taste. But there have been so many new varieties come onto the market in the last 20 years or so, and some of them are really, really great tasting. Tomatoes like Sweet Million, Sun Cherry Premium, Sun Gold is obviously the classic one that everyone knows, and this is one as well, and this one is the Zakura, and this one is a red cherry, and you can see I think this is the first truss to start to ripen, and again this is a prolific tomato, and it produces cherries of a decent size. As you can see here, they're probably about 2 centimetres in diameter. They can be a little bit bigger than that, and I've counted the tomatoes on this one, and this is quite interesting as well in terms of the truss formation and the size. This one's got 16 tomatoes on it. It's the first truss, and if we look over to the next plant, this has also got 16 tomatoes on its first truss. It might have a few more actually, maybe 18 when these flowers at the bottom turn into tomatoes. It's very, very reliable. You always get 7 or 8 trusses full of tomatoes, and if we just look at these two together, you'll see that the first truss is what you describe as a single truss with 16 to 18 tomatoes, but then the subsequent trusses are double trusses. I don't know if you can see that. If I just lift that up, there's a truss there with 16 on it, 16 or 18, and then there's a truss here. When I say a truss, it's actually half the truss. So we've got probably 34 to 36 tomatoes on that. Now if you get 8 trusses with 30, 35 tomatoes, you're talking 250 tomatoes on an individual plant. And if you go to the supermarket, as I did last Saturday, that's when I go and do the little bit of supermarket shopping that we do when it's quiet. It's about 9 o'clock on a night to avoid people. A pack with just one truss like that, or like this, it's a little bit more tidy, this truss. It costs about £1.80. £1.80. And if you get in 8 trusses, but the double trusses, so you're effectively getting 15 times that. At £1.80, 10 trusses is £18. So you're talking the best part of £30 worth of fruit on one plant by value in terms of pounds sterling. £30. It's phenomenal, really. And the other nice thing about these tomatoes is I'll be able to leave this truss until all the tomatoes have ripened. You wouldn't be able to do that with a sungold because, as you'll probably know by now if you've grown it, as soon as the tomato ripens, if it's left, it will split or go soft. And you're even recommended to take them maybe a day before they're really ready, just to let them ripen in your kitchen so that they don't split. These tomatoes, on the other hand, if it takes 2 weeks or even 3 weeks for this entire truss to ripen, you can take the entire truss as one, just like you would see it in the supermarket, and the first tomato to ripen will taste just as good as the last one, and that's quite remarkable, really. So I mean, these are an F1 variety. They've obviously been grown for commercial production. They have a great taste as well. They're nice and fleshy and sweet, and as I say, you can leave them on the plant, and sometimes when everything starts to ripen, you know, you can't get through them quickly enough, but with these you can kind of breathe a sigh of relief because you know that you'll be able to leave them on the plant, come back in 5 days or so, and the truss will still be in perfect condition. And it keeps as well, quite well, when you've got it in the kitchen. So we've currently got about 6 trusses on each of these, and I think, looking up the plants, we might be able to get another one on, so maybe 7 trusses. But they just cascade down the plant. As you can see, we've got a single one there, and then a double one, a forked one there, and then another forked one here, and where's the next truss? Yeah, then we've actually reverted to a single truss there on that one, and the next one is a single one. So and I think that's probably true of the others as well. So I may have overestimated it a little bit in terms of the value, but you're still talking about £25-ish per plant. So you really can't grumble about that. And as I say, the Sun Gold, well, 2 things going for this one. It'll grow and grow and grow. You know, if the conditions are right, it'll grow right up until probably the end of November, even into December on occasion. And you could get as many as 20 trusses if you've got the room for the plant to grow. And in fact, I did read once that it had been grown to many more than that. I can't remember the exact number. But in experiments, they've grown, you know, like 30 feet. So, but the other thing is, they're the first to ripen. So, from this time on, you know, you'll have a blush of fruit, and they'll just keep coming. I think I've probably got about a dozen plants spread over 3 greenhouses. So we should be okay for some gold tomatoes pretty much all the way through the season, maybe into the end of October. And I think we've about 5 or 6 trusses on this as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Actually, we've got a 7th truss forming at the top. And then here we've got a black cherry. And as you can see, this is kind of this in some respects has some of the growth habits of the beefsteak varieties. It reminds me very much of a beefsteak, not in terms of size, obviously, because it's a cherry, but it's a little bit wild. It has its own idea about how it wants to grow, if you want to look at it that way. The trusses can be massive, as you can see here. It's almost fan-shaped, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 tomatoes on one truss. So you can't grumble about the truss sizes. And in a good year, if it's not overwatered, that's another thing with this, because it can form quite a big cherry, the black cherry. Sometimes they're almost as big as a standard tomato, and they can taste beautiful if they're not overwatered, and that's true for many tomatoes. But this, as the name suggests, comes out a purpley black. It's very prolific. It's a very thick plant as well for a cherry, even up at the top. I mean, look, we're right up. This is at nearly 7 feet high. It's 7 feet high now, as near as damn it. And look how thick the stem is, even at that height. It's not a skinny plant. It's very, very robust. And we've currently got probably about 6 trusses, I think. But again, if you get 6 trusses with 25 tomatoes or so, that's a lot of tomatoes, 150. But there'll probably be more weight in these tomatoes compared to the others that we've looked at. So they're the cherries. Probably my 3 favourite varieties, although I am growing other varieties in some of the other greenhouses. I've got a Sunbaby and a Rosella, which is a tiny version of the black cherry, a little bit more rosy in colour, and kind of not a micro or a currant cherry, but quite small, but very tasty and very prolific as well. So they're my favourite beefsteak and cherry. And then down here, just at the start of the greenhouse, I'll just show you a couple of other plants which are a little bit odd, I guess. This is the Abe Lincoln tomato, and it's currently only about 2 feet high, which is strange really, considering that some of the other plants are 7 feet high. All the beefsteak are 5'6", the cherries are getting on for 7 foot, and this one is 2 feet high. And it's an indeterminate or a cordon tomato, but it's very slow growing. And I've let this first truss grow so long, then I cut off the end because it was continuing to grow beyond the truss. There are other tomatoes on it, but I may cut those off. And I've currently only got, I think it's 2 or 3 trusses, but it's very slow to grow. But it is producing a beautiful tomato. And this is the Abe Lincoln, and there are actually 2 strains, and I didn't realise this before I bought this seed a couple of years ago. The first strain, the original strain, was produced in 1923 by the Buckbee Seed Company in Rockford, Illinois, in America. And it was produced as a commercial tomato, but everybody bought it because it produced massive tomatoes, weighed as much as 2 or 3 pounds per individual tomato. And some trusses could weigh 10, 12, 14 pounds. You know, they'd have half a dozen tomatoes weighing more than 2 pounds or something like that. But then in the 70s, another strain was grown and given the same name. Now, I don't know which variety this is. It's possible that it's the later strain. We'll see, but the tomatoes are not huge, so that leads me to believe that it's the later. Although, from what I've heard, the original strain, the 1923 breed, grew to about 4 feet high, so that does suggest that it's not a tall tomato. But in any event, we'll see. If this is not the original strain, I won't continue to grow it probably, and I'll try and get hold of the other seed, the original seed. But we'll see. If it tastes good, then I might carry on growing it. And then if I just turn to the right, this is not a beefsteak and it's not a cherry, and it's in fact a standard tomato, and it's the only one that I grow. It's a Shirley type, but it's an open pollinated one. This is called Harbinger, and often they give this seed away as a free packet. When I first started growing tomatoes, and I'd buy the typical Thompson and Morgan seed at the garden centre, if you bought 3 packets, they'd often throw one of these in for free, and you'd get hundreds of seed as well. And it can produce a really beautiful tomato. It can be a little bit bigger than a Shirley, and it can produce 7, 8 really nice trusses, all of this size if I put my hand by it. And you can see on this one, this is a standard tomato, and this is 1 truss, the first truss, and there must be about 15 tomatoes on it, 14 or 15 tomatoes. And the first time I grew it in the greenhouse at home before I got the allotment, and I think I grew this for the first time in 2013, and it was a great summer, really hot summer, and all the tomatoes did well. Most tomato growers will remember that year. And this grew, I think, about 8 or 9 trusses, and each truss had about 15 tomatoes like this, but they were bigger than this. They were all as big as the biggest one here, and it tasted lovely as well. A really, like a bigger version of the Gardener's Delight, a really traditional tomatoey taste. So this is one I would recommend. Buy the seed once or get a free packet, and you never need buy seed again. Just grow the same tomato from your own saved seed. So this is a great tomato. Well, that's just about it, I think. So, oh, I have got one here as well that I'm growing, I think, only for the 2nd time, and this is one called German Johnson, and I think this is the only red one I'm growing in this greenhouse, the only red beefsteak, and this can grow to about £1 as well in weight, and it's a nice traditional looking beefsteak tomato, good yielding, but slow growing. It always looks a little bit weak when it starts. The seedlings and the plantlets that you grow can be quite small, but it does come into its own once it gets established. So that's my beefsteak and cherry in the long greenhouse, and I've talked for long enough, I think. You've seen what the tomatoes look like in the little pictures that I've popped up, so hopefully that'll give you a foretaste of what's to come. And it's a little bit frustrating at the moment, particularly given that, as everybody knows, everything was doing so well because we had such a fabulous spring. But this last month has contained probably 3 weeks of rainy days. Now that's been great for the plants outside, but it's not been great in terms of harvesting. But all the plants, as you can see, do look very healthy. So they've benefited from a little bit of relief from the sun. But now what we need is some settled weather. It doesn't have to be majorly hot, we just need good clear skies, and we'll keep us fingers crossed that it rains at night. Wishful thinking, I know, but yeah, some of these will be beautiful as they colour up, and I really look forward to sharing that with you. So please come back and join me again. We'll probably revisit the tomatoes in about 3 to 4 weeks and see how they're colouring up, and then maybe another 3 or 4 weeks after that when they're really putting on a good show. So thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.